but what they are is, instead of being, you know, this is kind of what I own, this is more of like my diaristic function. These are sort of skins of the experience that I've had. You know, these are sort of you know, ghosts of past experience. You know, and so and I'm very aware, kind of in that sort of historical reference of what the still life is, and how I feel like in some way I'm kind of bleeding the sort of life out of still life. You know, so it's just,
exactly, but you're also updating it, because you're describing, for instance, these still life as established in the 16th century as a record of possession or depiction of possession. Now you're presenting it as a record of or a depiction of consumption.
Yeah, yeah.
In other words, that the possession passes through you. Is used up.
And I don't know, like in some way I think about that. I was thinking about it. But I mean, I was thinking about that in relationship to living in a consumerist world, you know, in which you are defined as much by kind of what you consume as by, you know, like the views you have, or you know, the relationships you hold, or something like that. You know, and maybe it feels a little bit more kind of transparent living in a place like Southern California than it does in other places, but I don't think so. And it feels to me like a lot of that is kind of written into some of these pieces that I have going on.
There's a certain irony in that, because after all, as artists, you are responsible for fabrication. And in the world of possession, the mercantile world was a matter of the transformation or the translation of cultivation or manufacture into objects of virtue, objects of wealth.
And then there was a distinct break when I made this work where it was a weird thing for me. I was looking at the photographs of the Inca walls, of all things. And I was looking at them not as they became for me a color structure.
Right.
It became a way of how do you link these kind of pieces of color instead of doing this field of mixed color.
Yeah.
This is I have a question kind of for you, Joe, and I'm going to kind of say what I do, and I think it's kind of like the pieces here when I work them. There's a relationship between kind of each piece. Usually I got 2 or 3 or 4 going at once, but as they kind of achieve their completion to me, each one becomes kind of a springboard for the next one. Like what I do in this one, I don't want to redo that. I want to find a new thing to do. Be it how I address space coming off the painting, be it how I address wrapping the canvas so that it kind of goes away. However, the color, there's always something that occurs in one that ends up becoming okay, now how do I've done that, I kind of get that. Now what do I do? How do I make the next one fresher for me? And I'm kind of, so I have that process going on. And when I see these 3, I'm wondering if you go through the same process in terms of you do one and you see something and you say, okay, I kind of get that.
Well, I don't know if I would say it about like working with specific landscape, but when I kind of work everything together, because I think everything here is done in the last year, you know, I'm sort of grabbing a little bit of here. Yeah, I sort of yes and no. Like when I'm working within an area, I get pretty kind of focused and localized in that specific thing, and then I can almost get just pretty methodical in how I go. Okay, I'm going to finish this one, and then I'll start this one, and then when I finish that one, I'll start that one.
But I can see like how much, even in this one, I see like you get thick. There's a more 3-dimensional quality, I think, in this one than in the other ones.
Yeah. Well, you know, as I mean, I think about it maybe more in terms of scale. Like as I get a little bit more defined or larger on scale, like the definition, I'm just getting better at it. I'm getting a little bit more dexterous with handling. So in some way, you know, yes, it does start kind of getting better and better, as opposed to say the smaller pieces, which were the first ones, which they're very, I mean, those pieces to me really border on just abstractions to me. Whereas these, I think, you know, when you stand back from it, it's really hard to deny kind of seeing that real sort of black and white landscape, and then you start kind of getting closer to it, and everything starts breaking apart. Those ones sort of shift back and forth on a regular basis, no matter where you are. But while I'm doing those too, I'm also in my studio, like dipping bottles in plasti dip for hours at a time, and so or I'm like working on the bottle pieces too. So those kind of pieces like feed ideas for these type of pieces, and then these type of pieces begin to start feeding ideas, and sometimes they can sort of merge and overlap and bleed with each other, but not so much within each piece though. Like not so much like within say landscape A and landscape B. I would say more of a, like I said, more of like a development of dexterity or something like that. And then something like this comes from just like it's almost like a recycling piece. It's like I'm saving, again, sort of saving elements of consumption. Like after working with these type of things, I'm saving like hundreds and hundreds of these little Scotch tape cores.
I've got to say,
I'm like, I can't just get rid of it.
There's a box in my studio, a huge box. And it's just scraps of pieces. And I keep thinking like, what do you do? There's a whole bunch of stuff here.
But something will end up happening. I hate to say it, but I have a box of like half-inch felts that I've carried with me for the last 12 years. And it's still in my corner, and it's still sitting there, and I'm like, one of these days, one of these days, Mother, I'm going to get to you, but I haven't.
What a great exhibition of the bottom of the obsession boxes of your box of half-inch felt,
Yeah, no, just of like of debris, and in some way that's what it is. And a little bit of that's like when I think about, like 15 years ago when I used to make stuff out of dumpster diving and stuff like that, we just had to have boxes and boxes of things just around, and somehow you sort of tack that together, tack this together, and tack that. I've kind of gotten rid of that, and I still have elements of it hanging out in my studio where there are some things that I can't get rid of for some reason, because there's a piece in there and I just haven't found it yet. I just don't know what it is yet. But and that's why, like I love this idea of like this came out of just playing with this. I want to do something very like 20th century architecture with all these Scotch rolls, right?
Yeah, I'm looking at it thinking Matthias Goeritz, or Max Bill,
and
the old school.
But I wouldn't have been able to do that had I not gone through this process first, right? Had I not been able to like just acquire material.
So, well, that's interesting because intriguing because all this work tends to be inductive. It seems to be the manifestation of an idea, the fabrication of an idea. It's idea driven. This work is deductive.
Yeah.
It's something. The element itself, the fundament, tells you what to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And a lot of times it's like keeping an inventory in some way. Like the flowers. Like I knew I was going to do something with the flowers. I wasn't really so sure, but I know that if I do it, I have to cast like 600 of them, and then after I cast them, then I'll figure it out. But it is that process of sort of having it in the back of my head. I can't really do it until I have like 3,000 bottles or something like that, and then I can sort of figure out what I'm going to do with it.
I get the sense with you that nothing you do is a vacation from anything else you do.
Sometimes, yeah. I have 2 kids, so that's a big
Oh, there you go.
It's on a base of vellum, which is, anybody who doesn't know vellum, it's just a certain type of paper. It's like parchment paper. It's semi-transparent, but you can't really see through it, but it lets light through quite easily. And then, because it's on a black background, they're mounted on black rag board. So, how the image comes out is quite simply by just adding more and more and more tape creates a whiter surface. So in that way, I think about them almost like black and white photographs or something like that, where it's really just about a description of the light and the dark of that image. And so, long story short, I just keep building up tape after tape, layer after layer of tape. And so the whiter areas are about a 1/4 inch of Scotch tape, 3/8 of an inch. And then the darker areas are just like 1 layer of Scotch tape on top of vellum.